Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Day 2 of the Doha Forum, where we continue with our exploration of global trends and look at how they are reshaping the lives and political realities of countries across the Global South. Today, this morning, we turn our attention to Latin America, where countries are pursuing a more autonomous, inclusive, and multipolar regional order, one that isn't simply an extension of great power interests and priorities. We see this in their trade diversification, their engaged diplomacy, and their efforts to revive regional blocs, organizations like CELAC, UNASUR, and Mercosur, are seen as platforms for Latin America to express its own vision for the future, to articulate its own principles and pursue its own rules-based order, one that is grounded in international law, in justice and solidarity. An order that seeks equality among all nations, that prioritizes the dignity of all people and rejects the selective application of norms by powerful countries. Our panel, Paths to Prosperity in Latin America, the role of cross-regional diplomacy, looks at how the region is shaping its own new vision for a more balanced, a more inclusive, and a genuinely multilateral global system. It is my pleasure now to invite our distinguished panelists to the stage, Their Excellencies Mohammed bin Abdulaziz Al-Khulaifi, Minister of State of the State of Qatar; Márcio Cozendey, Secretary of Multilateral Political Affairs of the Federal Republic of Brazil; Alberto Castiglioni, former Vice President of the Republic of Paraguay; Alejandro Sánchez Pereira, Secretary of the Presidency of the Republic of Uruguay; Diego Martínez Belío, State Secretary for Foreign and Global Affairs of the Kingdom of Spain. Please join us on stage, and please welcome the moderator of this panel, Charles Powell, Director of Elcano Royal Institute. Welcome.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. My name is Charles Powell, and I'm the director of the Elcano Royal Institute, Real Instituto Elcano in Madrid, which is Spain's leading international relations think tank. And before I start, let me just say what a pleasure and an honor it is to be partnering with the Doha Forum here today. As has just been said, I think this is an extremely timely meeting. The multilateral order is clearly under threat. Some countries have responded to this by developing minilateral organizations and procedures, but it is also in this context that cross-regional diplomacy has really come into its own, and that is basically what we are going to explore this morning. And I will first of all ask His Excellency Mohammed bin Abdulaziz Al-Khulaifi to tell us about how Qatar sees cross-regional diplomacy. What are the biggest challenges in achieving your goals? We heard yesterday that you have just signed a very important agreement with Colombia, which, as I was telling you earlier, is one of my favorite countries in the world. So I'm extremely grateful to you. Congratulations. And I particularly wanted to ask you, what does Qatar bring to the table specifically? What are Qatar's advantages when it comes to dealing with cross-regional diplomacy?
Thank you so much for this comprehensive question. I'll try to be short but very direct. Mediation is a strategic pillar in our foreign policy. We've been very much engaged with several requests from friends around the globe to ask Qatar to mediate and resolve conflicts between the disputing parties. We've been engaged in cases in East and West without any geographical boundaries. And I think that's the unique elements of Qatar's approach, that we don't have a limitation or geographical limitation in terms of our approach to those different conflicts. In spite of their difficulties and sometimes conflicts that are deeply rooted for years between the disputing parties. But we've managed to add elements of neutrality, trust, and new initiatives that can bring the parties together. I think the role of a mediator is really to build bridges and fill the gaps between the disputing parties. And that's what Qatar has been unique for. We've been dealing with cases globally that has been known as the most complicated and difficult cases. Of course, the mediation between the Palestinians and the Israelis comes at the top of the list. But when it comes to Latin America, it's a very important and strategic approach for the state of Qatar. We've been recently engaged in several cases. In the last 4 years, we've been very engaged in the case between Venezuela and the United States, and between the previous US administration, the Biden administration, and the Venezuela governments. That was honestly an important experience for us that built Qatar's reputation in the continent of Latin America. We have received several requests following up that, including the recent achievements in Colombia that we have managed to achieve with our partners from Spain, Switzerland, and Norway. It's a very important milestone, but I think it's when you were referring honestly to cross-regional diplomacy, it's a very important terminology that needs to be applied at a higher level. People and countries, governments cannot always resolve their conflicts within their regional territories. Relying on trusted partners internationally is always a useful tool in trying to bring the disputing parties together. And I think that's the motive behind Qatar's being reliable international partners in resolving conflicts internationally, but more specifically in the context of our discussion today, Latin America.
Thank you very much. Let me move now to Brazil. We are on the cusp now of the signing of a very important deal between the European Union and Mercosur. President Lula of Brazil announced recently that this deal might be signed on the 20th of December. Brazil, of course, represents something like 40% of Latin America's GDP and 70% of the economy of the Mercosur countries, the others being Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. But at the same time, regions remain fragile in Latin America, I believe. So when we're talking about cross-regional diplomacy, it obviously helps if the regions in question are already well-established and share common goals and common values. We in the European Union, of course, have a long experience of that, but I was wondering whether you believe that these kinds of cross-regional diplomacy efforts will strengthen intra-Latin American regional cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, in the region, we have a long tradition of trying to integrate. Therefore, there's a lot of institutions that not always have had the results that were expected, but there's a lot of convergence in a number of areas. And the experiences of cross-regional diplomacy have always been an instrument to reinforce that unity in a sense. Because we have, for instance, the CELAC, which is a group that puts together all Latin American countries. And we have had different occasions, for instance, CELAC EU meetings that have been important in order for both regions to create a dialogue and understand the similarities, the commonalities they have in a number of different areas. The same happens with the negotiation of the Mercosur-EU agreement. In different moments of this long yes. negotiation, it has been important for the Mercosur countries to have to get together, get their act together in order to be able to negotiate with the European Union. In some moments, it was even an instrument of cohesion within Mercosur, the fact that we needed to face that tough and difficult negotiation as well. So I think it has been very positive for the region, all kinds of inter-regional relations for the region as a whole, but also for Brazil as a country. Brazil has been trying to be more present everywhere. Mercosur has been trying to negotiate also agreements with the Gulf countries, have had some kinds of dialogue in that area as well. I think we, in a moment where the global situation is so fragile and unstable, it's important to create those linkages and to reinforce that kind of linkages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Luis Alberto Castiglioni from Paraguay. It's often said that smaller states are very much in favor of minilateral arrangements because they have a bigger say than they would otherwise have in a broader multilateral context. I'm a bit embarrassed to describe Paraguay as a small country because, as Paul-Henri Spaak, the Belgian politician, once said, there are two kinds of states in Europe, small states and states that haven't realized that they're small. And perhaps this is true of Latin America as well. But specifically, could you tell us how a country like Paraguay deals with its relationships with much larger countries such as Brazil and indeed Argentina? Thank you.
Bueno. Buenos días.
Good morning. And please allow me, Charles, to please serve a recognition here to the Minister of State of Qatar, here in person, to himself, as well to the government of Your Highness, the Emir, because Qatar, with its conviction and faith in this multilateral action in a global manner in the pandemic times, it approached its cooperation and solidarity with my country, with Paraguay, saving thousands of lives. So first of all, I would like to express my gratitude for everyone to know about this, and I would like to publicly say thank you to the Minister of Qatar. This is worth it because multilateralism entails solidarity and cooperation as well for its actions. Secondly, Paraguay counts on a long trajectory in particular actions to contribute to multilateralism, and this has happened for decades. And it's been one of the main drivers, alongside Brazil, for the creation of Mercosur, which is the common market of the South, that started as a mirror of the European Union, inspired by the success of this multilateral initiative that is the European Union. And that's how Mercosur was born, to make this multilateral integration a reality in Latin America. And through that, this has helped us to reinforce with our partners this institution. Within Mercosur, I would like to admit that we work with the concept of minilateralism. That is the reality, Charles. We work very well here with our brothers, which are Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, developing concrete actions with a great advantage. Because we're all close to each other, we are very alike, and we have a common vision from great values as democracy, the human being's dignity, the respect for human rights. Starting from these great values, we then land into particular objectives. And we work together in terms of security, for example, mentioning the security with the borders of Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina, where we deal with particular actions with countries, other countries as well. But also this is within the minilateralism framework. And also in terms of economy, right now we are developing the Bio-Oceanic Corridor, which has been denominated as the second Panama Canal, which unites the Atlantic with the Pacific Oceans and allows many regions from Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina through the ports of Chile to reach to the markets of the East, saving almost 21 days of traveling, which is 8,000 kilometers, saving a lot in logistics. This is how minilateralism works, with flexibility, with speed, with efficiency, with efficacy. And I believe this is how multilateralism needs to get to after the very needed reforms that might take place within its institutions for it to be again useful as it was in the past. Thank you very much.
Presents Uruguay, which is a country which has long been known for its commitment to multilateral organizations and practices. Uruguay has very often punched above its weight, I would argue. And I wanted to know from you whether you believe that the multilateral order is in terminal crisis. Is it simply going through a hiccup, shall we say, or do you think we are facing a turning point in international affairs? In other words, that business as usual will no longer work. And in connection with this, I was wondering, the Mercosur EU negotiations have been going on for 25 years, which is quite an extraordinary amount of time. If Qatar had been involved, obviously, it would have been much less. How do you read this, and what lessons do you take away from Uruguay's long-standing historic commitment to the EU-Latin American relationship? Thank you.
Bueno, muy buenos días.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this question, which is a complex question, which is quite the point in the days that we live in. These multilateralism institutions started when internet wasn't there, and the world we have today is very different from the world that arose after the Second World War. Geopolitics, commerce, trade, the Pacific, the Atlantic, everything has changed comparing to the world that we had right after the Second World War. Therefore, I believe that the consensus right now in the world, in a world dictated by uncertainty, is that multilateralism is going through a crisis. And I think that the main question here is, how do we interpret the crisis of the multilateralism, and which are the alternatives that we need to suggest, knowing that the institutions that represent multilateralism are not achieving to resolve the problems that the world has, the tensions that the world has. Currently, we have cross-state conflicts, and we have the biggest amount of conflicts since the Second World War, and we also have internal conflicts within the states. So definitely, this is a highly complex country. Uruguay is a small country, and we always go for Pacific conflict resolution, peaceful conflict resolution, and we always want to achieve our common target, which is to achieve the well-being of our societies. So yes, today we're living a world of tensions, but I believe that the reconstruction of the multilateral spaces is going to go towards not the solution of the reforms from the top, but most likely the group of regional spaces like Mercosur, CELAC, and the other spaces that deal with this friendship and cooperation relations, like, for example, the possibility that on the 20th of December we will sign a Mercosur and European Union agreement that is going to be very relevant. So I believe that the world complexity is the one that says that after 25 years of negotiations, we're finally managing to achieve this. All of this is an example of how our days are. So now, in order to build from something small, this would be the best path for the big solutions that the world needs. Usually when we build a building, we start with the foundations. And we're not able to solve everything from the top. But we need to use these regional agreements that are slowly building solutions and finding dialogues. Uruguay has been always betting for these spaces, these dialogue spaces, believing that if our grandparents were able, after in a critical moment about the ability of the humans to destroy life and the planet, and they were able to build a path that achieved several decades of peace, I believe that now we should be able to look long term, and we should be able to build a future, and we should look at this with optimism and hope. Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask Diego Martínez Belío, who is what I call a thinking man's diplomat, because he's interested in academic and intellectual debates about diplomacy and international relations. Are you ever concerned that the rise of minilateralism might actually undermine larger multilateral structures? In other words, they may be more effective in the short term, they may deliver certain results which are badly needed, but isn't there a danger perhaps that the proliferation of minilateral agreements may actually weaken the multilateral order overall? I'm thinking, for example, of the World Trade Organization. Let me also ask you, since we may not have too much time for this later, Spain joined the European Union in 1986 and has always advocated stronger ties with Latin America. So if the Mercosur deal is signed, this would obviously be a great success for Spain as well as the EU as a whole. How easy is it, though, for Spain to remind our EU partners that Latin America is an absolutely crucial region of the world? Because, of course, nowadays everyone is obsessing with Ukraine, rightly so, of course. We are also deeply concerned about what's happening nearer to this part of the world in Gaza. So how easy is it for you to convince your German or your French colleagues that they should actually take the longer view and spend more time on Latin America? Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I'm happy about this second part of the question, because I was thinking, reading the material for the panel, and we are here today in Qatar, and we are having a panel on Latin America. We have representatives from 3 continents. And I was thinking, are there panels like this in most European forums? Because I'm not so sure. Perhaps there are, but not so many. And we hear, I mean, I'm not availing myself of the opportunity, but we have a translation into Spanish, interpretation, which our European friends are very reluctant to grant in the European institutions, and because they're only thinking about Spain, and they're not thinking of what Spanish represents as a language in the world. So, and this was leading me, as I was hearing the other co-panelists, to think also of the way that when we raise these matters in the European Union, we have to raise them, I would say. Whereas when I speak with Qatarian, we have just finalized a very successful mediation with Colombia. And I think this speaks to the fact that we're here today, the mediation itself, to Qatar's far-sighted foreign policy and global foreign policy. And when I speak to, of course, our Qatari friends, friends from the Gulf, friends from Asia, Africa, Arab world, when they think of Spain, they automatically raise Latin America. They bring up Latin America matters, or they ask what we can do together in Latin America, or how we see things. And I have to say, this is something that seldom happens with European colleagues. And I think that's problematic, and it speaks to the lack of, or perhaps, as you said, Ukraine, but it's not only Ukraine. I think, of course, Ukraine has made these trends stronger, but sometimes one feels that Europe is becoming ever more self-centered, at the same time that the rest of the world is becoming ever more interconnected in both the positive ways and the negative ways. So I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it's something that we have to bring up first, like Mercosur, for instance. And I was discussing with our Brazilian friend about how in the European Council in, I think, was 2019, I myself, I was then at the Prime Minister's office, We brought the letter with 8 other countries, but it was promoted by Spain. Germany with Chancellor Merkel was on board as well, and this was the renewal for the political impulsion to the Mercosur deal. And you said 25 years for Mercosur, and I think that speaks volumes to the point where it even shows a certain lack, not only of interest, but almost of seriousness on our part. And now we have the signature on the 20th, so that's something of a Christmas gift for us, and I think it's also an important step for Europe. I think we are stepping up as well, but there are some trends that we need to change. On minilateralism, I think this is a broad term which includes two very different things, in fact. One is regional integration, and the other one is something which you can perhaps more identify like with international alignments. Two very different things. I think regional integration is in itself positive. I think there are few countries in the world which are as enthusiastic as Spain on regional integration in the European Union, but we've also supported it with our Latin American friends. In Africa, we are huge supporters of the African Union, of ECOWAS as well, and other integration processes. So I think those are inherently positive. We also have, of course, the Ibero-American community, and we'll be hosting the summit next year in Spain. So I don't think those are at all in contradiction. I think, on the contrary, in significant number of times, it can be favorable to the goals of multilateral organization. And what we see is that countries that are in regional integration processes are very often the same countries as Spain, which are 100% committed to multilateralism.
Thank you. Yes, you're quite right in underlining that it's probably quite rare to have a panel such as this in many international fora, and we're very grateful to Qatar for doing this. Minister, is there a sort of one-size-fits-all model for mediation and cross-regional diplomacy? Because we were discussing earlier, off the record, I don't want to get you in trouble, but you know, that the Swiss and the Norwegians, they seemed to have a one-size-fits-all approach, methodology, if you like, towards mediation and conflict resolution. And you were telling me earlier that the Swiss are now engaging with you because, to some extent, I think they want to understand why you are being successful where perhaps they no longer are. So my question is basically, what's the role of flexibility in all of this, and what's the role of personal leadership? Thank you.
Thank you so much. The simple answer, no. There is no one-size-fits-all. I think each case by itself has its own assessment and determination when it comes to the conflicts, the parties, the backgrounds, and the way and the approach the mediators would select in resolving those conflicts. Qatar has built up this experience. We have more than 25 years of experience in the field of mediation. We've been covering cases all over the globe with different parties and different backgrounds. Also different cultural backgrounds. I have an example in my mind, the Afghanistan-United States negotiations in Doha. Totally different cultural backgrounds, nations that led to an agreement in 2020. This is something that is very critical for us, is trying to build the bridges. The mediator's role is simply to put the full attentions towards the case itself and trying to bring the parties together. It is the parties' duties to fulfill the agreements and to sustain that agreement in a longer period of time. When it comes to the points that you have raising related to the partners, we appreciate, honestly, the engagement that we're having with Norway, Switzerland, with Spain, and several other countries around the globe. We've signed several MOUs and letter of intents in the field of mediation. We believe, honestly, that today's conflict, one mediator cannot do it all. A group of mediators can be more efficient, more effective, and timely when it comes to resolving those conflicts in a determined period of time. Conflicts are always going to be there. And that's the fact that people need to realize. I remember the saying that peace is not the absence of conflict, but it's the ability to cope with it. We need to cope with conflicts in a way that will be very structured, with a clear methodology that will allow the mediators to perform their tasks. I've said that before and continue to say it. Mediation is contagious. One successful story will lead to other successful stories. And I believe that the momentum that we have created in Latin America has allowed more countries within that continent to knock the door of Qatar and engage with us more thoroughly towards those requests. Qatar will continue to fulfill that role. It's a constitutional mandate. And the approach, I think the unique approach that Qatar is following is that we keep our doors always open. We talk to all parties, state actors and non-state actors. And I've seen many of my colleagues around the globe, including Europeans, hesitant in getting engaged in many of the disputes due to the fact that some of the non-state actors are somehow difficult for those governments to approach them. For us, we believe that the ultimate objective is finding a permanent and sustainable solution. We believe that the ultimate objective is to secure an important humanitarian outcome. Many of the conflicts around the globe has its own catastrophe and a humanitarian impact. And this is something that Qatar strongly believes in, that the motive behind our work is purely humanitarian, and sometimes it comes at the cost of the mediator itself. And we've seen in several mediations where Qatar has lifted this heavy weight for the sake of achieving this ultimate objectives. We remain hopeful, we remain engaged with the different countries in Latin America, and we believe that the future will have further opportunities for Qatar and countries in Latin America.
Thank you very much. It's important to... Thank you. It's important to stress that success breeds success. We're running out of time, but I'd like all of you, gentlemen, to tell me in 2 words, 3 words perhaps, what the major consequences of the EU-Mercosur deal would be for your country and perhaps for the region generally. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the main effect of Mercosur-EU agreement would be to oxygenate the Brazilian economy. The Brazilian economy has traditionally been constituted under tariff protections and on the basis of the big market that we have in Brazil. And opening it to the European Union would oxygenate it, generate competition, generate innovation, and that would be to the benefit of the Brazilian population. One point which is important is that, contrary to what some Europeans think, agriculture is not going to be the big result for Brazil, because the agreement is an administrative trade agreement in the agricultural area. So in fact, in the end, probably EU will benefit more from the agreement in the agricultural area because it's a big exporter of processed products than Mercosur itself. It has been used as a political problem to make difficult the agreement to go forward. It has been a political problem, but it's not at all an economic problem for the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. One of our analysts at the Elcano Royal Institute, who is a Uruguayan economist whom you know, Ernesto Talvi, he always stresses the fact that actually as a result of the signing of the agreement, tariffs between the Mercosur countries would practically disappear, and this would lead to a significant increase in interregional trade. Am I right?
Now, among Mercosur countries, they have already disappeared, except for sugar.
Some.
But it will certainly be an incentive for Mercosur industries to integrate more in order to export to Europe. I think that effect will also happen.
Thank you very much for that clarification. How about the Paraguayan view?
Well, correct.
It's going to have a very important impact, the signing of this agreement. Paraguay has even achieved the negotiation of some special conditions due to our very own condition of being a country that is landlocked. And consequently, we have achieved that 95% of the products that we are normally exporting to Europe are going to have 0 tariffs. And this grants us an enormous opportunity that will give us a great competitiveness in order to enlarge our markets. And at the same time, I would like to highlight something. We are going to be exporting food products, and we will also be exporting clean energies and fuels. But there's something very important that also entails an opportunity for Europe. Europe is going to have a space where they can invest in infrastructure, clean energy, and in many other areas of the economy that are going to have Europe as a destination. These are going to be investments in both sides and that are going to help develop both regions as it's required, because this is a win-win project. Both sides have to get benefit out of it. And I would even add something else. This is going to be the first model of an amplified market that has an interregional character from one continent to another. And it's going to compile 25% of our GDP. And I am sure is going to be replicated in other new models. This model is going to have a great success and is going to create a great number of new models of markets because of its success. Finally, Paraguay is also going to benefit from the transfer of technology by the modernization of its institutions, as, for example, in terms of intellectual property, public contracts, cybernetic security contracts. Our country is probably going to be one of the ones that gets the utmost benefit, but also Paraguay becomes completely open to offer all we have to offer in terms of opportunities for Europe, so they can make use of this agreement. So both America Latina, Mercosur, Europe can get benefit out of it and enlarge it to the rest of the world.
It can have systemic institutional consequences. What about the view from Uruguay? Are you optimistic? Are you sanguine about the consequences of an EU-Mercosur deal? How will you benefit?
Well, I think this is a great agreement. We have done a great deal of work unifying forces and hours of diplomatic human resources from both continents that we have been investing in terms of time to achieve this agreement. So we are obviously all very happy that this is materializing. And I do believe that it's going to have a great financial impact in the region and in Mercosur, because we're living in a world where disruption and technology changes, particularly Argentina and Mercosur, that are important food products producers, and they will continue to be for a long time. I think in this world, in the 90s, we were talking a lot about transforming the marketplace, but what we need to do now, particularly in Argentina, is to reconvert our companies. They need to look at international markets in a different way, incorporating science, technology, innovation, and the demands of the current world we live in, and that in a way that they allow to provide all of the advantages that Latin America has to offer, and allow us to open our markets more to the rest of the world. I think this is going to be a great opportunity and a great benefit for Mercosur. Additionally, the agreement between Mercosur and the EU, and it being reduced to simply a commercial agreement, does not match the reality that we live in. What we are building beyond a trade area and an area for cooperation, it's an area of shared values, values such as human rights, democracy, the resolution of controversies through talks and dialogue. And we're also building the defense of respect between nations and the search for peaceful resolutions of conflicts and dialogue. And I think this agreement between the EU and Mercosur also represents a political opportunity to show the chances the current world has to resolve conflicts in other ways. We do believe that production and commercial agreements are important, but this agreement also gives a further commitment to the rest of humanity.
That actually Europe, of course, we still regard as a normative power. And I know this is old-fashioned, but I'm sticking to my guns on this one. As Professor Ian Manners said many years ago, we are a normative power because we believe in norms, and therefore we also believe in a rules-based international order. But what you said about prosperity in the economy is very important as well. Hopefully this agreement will lead to equitable growth, sustainable growth, more inclusive growth, and not just economic growth at any price. Secretary of State, Minister Alvarez likes to say that Latin America is the most Euro-compatible region in the world. Perhaps I would add that Europe is the most Latin America-compatible region in the world. I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with that. What systemic impact is this going to have right now, especially in the wake of Donald Trump's national security strategy, which people are hyperventilating about? You know, we need a breath of fresh air. We need a bit of hope. We need to restore our faith in cross-regional diplomacy and in multilateralism. Do you think the agreement will have this impact? Thank you.
Absolutely. And I would like, of course, this will be the largest trade agreement in the world, though that's very important in and of itself, and I think the economic impact has been stressed by everyone. I would like to also stress the value aspect, and why is Latin America Euro-compatible or Europe Latin America compatible? I think it's probably Europe is not as conscious of being compatible with Latin America as the other way around, and I think this agreement will help change that perception. It will help through the creation of economic bonds, which in fact always imply human ties, will help anchor the relationship between Europe and Latin America. That's something we've pushed during our presidency. We had the first EU-CELAC summit in 8 years. We established periodic summits, also a follow-up mechanism on ministries. I think it's also, so that's, I think, the main result. And as a diplomat, I like to think more in political terms. And these trade ties will bring human ties, and that means political capital and attention as well. And I think it's also, and now I'm thinking more selfishly as a Spaniard and European, it's a symbol of the European Union really taking itself seriously, itself and the words that we say, in a way putting our money where our mouth is, and saying that, you know, when we say we want to be a strategic power, we want to be a power for norms and order in the world, that we are finally stepping up our game and we are getting important things done.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We've actually finished on time, which is a miracle whenever I'm a moderator. We have 35 seconds to go. So let me just conclude by asking you all to thank our speakers. Many of them have come a long way to be here with you today, and of course the Minister for his inspiring leadership. Thank you.